My name is Brianna Holbert, and this is my second week of my lifestyle project. So, this week's challenge was the same as the last. I decided that I would leave my car at home, have a meat-free week, and use less electricity. So, last time we spoke, I talked about the idea of changing a mountain to a molehill, as a molehill is a smaller, more digestible challenge in front of us, whereas a mountain is something we look at and we're like, dang, that's super difficult for us to conquer. A molehill was more so how I wanted to look at this week, as the first week was, as I started the lifestyle project, was kind of hard to see, look at, and munch on. But as I went through the first week, I realized how easy it was to just change small steps to make a more sustainable life. So now coming into the second week, I'm a lot more confident in my ability to make this sustainability project more of a molehill as we increase the amount of days we're asked to be more sustainable in 3 areas. So leaving my car at home was pretty easy this week, not just because of what I talked about last week of the gas being expensive, but in the beginning of the week, 2 of my tires went completely flat and I had to get 2 new ones. And so that process took a while. So it was pretty easy to leave my car at home. And a couple of things I realized through leaving my car at home, collected data, is the gas saved, the carbon saved, the miles walked, and the money saved. So through various equations, I was able to gather this research. So in my Honda Civic, I spend about $20 of gas a gallon at 32 miles per hour. Now, on average, each week I drive about 70 miles. So 70 miles times 3 days, I saved about 2.2 gallons of fuel. Now, the carbon save was pretty interesting as I equated that into pounds of carbon. Now, I did the same equation as last, except this time it was converted to pounds, and I was saving about 42.68 pounds of carbon into the atmosphere. Another portion of this, I took into consideration, my own health and what effects it's having on me. So by walking to school those 3 days, it's about 0.4 miles to campus and back, times the 3 days that I had spent walking, and I walked about 1.2 miles. So if I were to do that the whole week, I could see myself walking probably a solid 3 to 4 miles a week, which is pretty good to keep up my exercise and my health. Lastly, for leaving my car at home, I was able to save about 0.625 cents per gallon of gas. So times 2.2 miles, that was $1.37 of gas for 3 days. Meat-free, again, not super difficult. Meat prices are pretty high nowadays. So when I went into my meat-free week, I considered a couple of different options. Again, through my meat-free week, I considered meat saved, carbon saved, electricity used for my stovetop, for various items in my kitchen that I used to cook the meat, and then money saved. So meat saved, I usually eat about 0.5 pounds of meat per day. An average human does, whether it's chicken or it's various different livestock animals, times 3 days. And I was able to save about 1.5 pounds of meat. That's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The carbon saved, so I took 0.5 pounds of meat times 3 days times carbon emissions per kilogram, and I was able to save 8.98 kilograms of CO2 of carbon, which at the end of the day doesn't seem like a significant amount over 3 days, but I can only imagine how it would be over the course of months and or years of eating meat-free. Next, I focused on electricity. I tried to dissect, okay, what are some items in the kitchen that I'm using to cook the meat? Most of the time, it was my stovetop in connection with a pan or pot. So I took into consideration how much wattage that my stove is using on average, and it is a electric stove, so it is using about 1,500 watts per day times 3. That's 4,500 watts. That's pretty significant. And lastly, the money I saved was about 10 cents per day, which equated to about 30 cents on electricity over 3 days. However, I still believe, just as the carbon emissions, it might look like a small number, but over the course of months and years, it can become pretty significant. Speaking of electricity, electricity use was my third and final lifestyle project measurement, as I am increasingly trying to look for ways for myself to be more sustainable in this usage, whether that's unplugging some of my items inside my room, like my fan or my phone charger or my computer charger or my lamp light. I'm looking for different ways to use less light, as well as taking the opportunities to make foods that, like meat-free, I don't have to use the stovetop as often. So when I looked at my electricity use, it came down to 4 different quadrants: my plugins, heater, stovetop, laundry, and dryer. And as you can see, each one kind of took different measurements and different units. For example, plugins, I measured it by kilowatts, heater was by watts, stovetop was also watts, and laundry dryer was also watts. I took this information from online, from various different electricity providers, from PG&E, from SMUD, from various different electricity providers, in order to provide the best and most accurate information. So for plugins, I used about 0.623 kilowatts per day. So if we multiply that by 3, it's about 1.9 kilowatts of electricity. For a heater, I use about 4,000 watts per day times 3. On average, that's 12,000 watts. Again, my roommates and I don't use the heater quite as often anymore, but on a typical day, if I was just living my life back in home in Sacramento, I probably would turn on the heater quite significantly to hit 4,000 watts per day. Stovetop, I use about 1,500 wattages, like we talked about with our meat-free week. And then I multiplied that by 3, and I got 4,500 watts using the stovetop, which is pretty significant. And then laundry and dryer, I have 5,000 watts per day times 3 is about 15,000 watts. The other 2 graphics put how much I saved through doing those sustainable practices. Electricity use, this graphic is what I would use on a daily basis. However, I had little to no usage. For example, with my plug-in, I would plug in my phone to the percentage it needed to be at, and then I would unplug it. Heater, I didn't use at all. Stovetop was pretty minimal usage. Laundry and dryer for 3 days I hadn't used. This week definitely was more of a molehill, just because I've gotten to experience what it's like to live a sustainable life in these 3 areas this last week. Only for 2 days, though. As we said before, this is 3 days, so it's a little bit more significant. However, I think the practice of adding a day each week to where it starts becoming a normal part of our life is what's going to make that molehill that we travel through in the journey of sustainability smaller and smaller. And that's my lifestyle project, week 2. I'm excited to continue to practice these and excited to see what y'all bring to the table with your lifestyle projects.